Today on Locked On Red Wings, Olli Maatta was dealt to the Utah Hockey Club for a third-round pick. Why did the Red Wings do that, and did they get enough back in return?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And I am a color commentator for Oakland University D1 Hockey. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Scotty, we are going to open the show talking about the trade that happened on Tuesday because we haven't really had an opportunity to talk about it yet, as well as kind of looking at the month of October and having the conversation about did they do enough, regardless of the product on the ice, did they do enough in the standings to stay in it, and looking ahead to November. And then in the segment 3, we'll clean things up by talking about the Sabres game on Saturday. So going back to where we're going to begin, Scotty, late Tuesday night, I think it was like around 11 o'clock, the Detroit Red Wings traded defenseman Olli Maatta to the Utah Hockey Club for a 2025 third-round pick, which originally belonged to the New York Rangers, so presumably it'll be a late third-round pick. The question here and plenty of people are already aware, but just to recap, why did they make this trade? And was this, in your opinion, a good trade? And for many reasons, why would it be a good trade?
Yeah, I think this is a fine, like really solid move for the Wings. I'm not going to throw a parade for a third round pick for a third pair defenseman, but I think that this is really good, as you have written on the show sheet here. Like this is really good asset management. This is taking advantage of a team whose blue line is really thin and is looking for anyone to fill that void a little bit and kind of soften that blow. The Wings obviously have had 8 defensemen on their roster, so that's an easy candidate for them to help out a team like that as well. And I mean, as far as value, yeah, like a third round pick for Olli Maatta is a slam dunk, no brainer. Good job, everybody. High fives around the press room. So I think that this is a really good deal for the Wings. I know that they've obviously had their shortcomings defensively, and we talk about how thin the blue line is all the time. There's really everybody not named Edvinsson and Seider I would consider doing this with. They're all in a similar vein. That's not to say Olli Maatta wasn't having a fine season. I think he was, but at the end of the day, he was a third pair defenseman on a team that really doesn't have a good second pair. So I think a third round pick for him is more than enough. That is really good value for the Wings, and I think this is a good job by the front office.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on beyond just the return for him, like the getting him off the roster. Not that Olli Maatta was fine, right? I want to state that first. Like, Olli Maatta served his purpose, and he served it well for the last little over 2 seasons he played with the Detroit Red Wings, and he earned that extension, right? His first season, he had a really solid first season.
Extension.
Yeah,
on here we were talking about how we wanted him to get extended,
right? And then last year he was saddled with Shane Gostisbehere, and for the purpose they were used, they were effective. They weren't great defensively. That pair was horrible defensively, but that pair scored a lot of goals, primarily because Shane Gostisbehere was incredible in the offensive zone, and they kept deploying him in the offensive zone as a result. But the problem became that as the years went on, he kept getting pushed a little bit further down the depth chart, especially going into this season, right? With Albert Johansson no longer waiver eligible, and the addition of Erik Gustafsson, you suddenly found yourself with 8 D-men. And we talked about it all the way back in the Who Stays, Who Goes episode. Olli Maatta to us was a prime candidate to get moved, not because he was playing poorly, but because he was the easiest to move. And I don't think you're really that much worse, if any worse, without him. He's a steady defenseman who you asked to do a job a niche job, a limited role, and he did it fine. But he had no trade protection, and he was making $3 million a year. So if you wanted to clear a roster spot, he was the easiest to be moved, as we saw. The Red Wings saw an opportunity with the Utah Hockey Club, who had lost Durzi and Marino for a lengthy period of time, and were just looking to add any type of depth. Said, what can you give us? They said, late third-round pick. We said, deal. Because not only does it, clear the logjam on defense, so now we can see more Albert Johansson, who's going to play a very similar role. I mean, the only problem with entrusting Johansson with that role is at least Olli Maatta was proven. But at some point, you got to give Albert Johansson the chance to prove himself, and now he will have that opportunity, which is good for the Red Wings. It clears $3 million in cap space, which for the short term isn't that big of a deal, right? Because he was going to be gone at the end of the year anyways. I didn't see them extending him.
A little bit of flexibility at the deadline.
And also, not to forget, that yesterday was the 10th game, the game against the Jets. That was the first portion of Patrick Kane's signing bonus kicked in. Yeah. So, you also have to think about that as well. If you don't want that to carry over to next year's cap hit, this $3 million could be used to then pay Patrick Kane this season as well. So, it creates cap space. It creates a roster spot in it of itself, which could be used to permanently keep Marco Kasper up, and to keep Marco Kasper up while also keeping another roster spot to accrue cap space, because that's a big deal for the Wings this year is cap accrual, because he was already going to be safe to stay up with Ville Husso sent down, but now they're going to have an extra spot and still be able to keep Marco Kasper. So, this is a multifaceted win for the Detroit Red Wings. The biggest loss, too, with this trade is the fact that you lost a proven depth defenseman, but I think that role is a dime a dozen. I think it's easily replaced by a guy like Albert Johansson, especially as he gets more and more game time, gets his footing underneath him. You had 8 defensemen who could, on this roster, 6 of which can play third pair minutes. Moving one for a third-round pick, clearing up that cap space and that roster spot is a win in my book.
Yeah, same. I for real, I don't think there's too much downside to this move at all. You had 8 defensemen. This is a deal that you almost look at and you go, what? Why did something like this not happen over the summer? I know right. You called me at whatever it was, 11:15 p.m. after this trade.
I was so mad.
Happened, and we kind of talked about a little bit of our initial kind of knee-jerk reactions there, and that was something you had said as well on that phone call. Was this is almost a deal you look at and you're like, yeah, this is great. Why was this not something that was possible to do in July, August, or September, right? Why did we wait until almost a month into the season to do a deal like this? But the fact of the matter is they did it. They got great value for Olli Maatta. This is great trade value. And like you said, now they have 7 defensemen. Great. Now they have the normal quote unquote amount of defensemen that most teams have. And certainly it'll give some more opportunities for Aljo as well. I don't think Olli Maatta was necessarily the answer of who's going to fix the second pair. That's not to say that he wouldn't have gotten an opportunity if he stayed, because I think everybody probably should, but unless you were uber confident that Olli Maatta was just going to be a really, rock solid top 4 defenseman the rest of the way, then this is a deal you make 10 out of 10 times.
Well, and the only, like you said, I was asking why did this not happen over the summer? I mean, obviously the answer is because Utah had Marino and Durzi healthy at that time, and they got banged up and they got desperate. But it's just hard to convince me that there's nobody out there, including bottom feeders, that weren't willing to take on 1 year of a serviceable depth defenseman in Olli Maatta to make their team a little bit better and have a 2-time Stanley Cup champion veteran presence in the locker room. So it's hard for me to believe that, but I don't want to. That's fine. That doesn't bother me.
Give up that high of a pick though,
right? But do I really? If you're trying to clear a logjam, do I need to get a high of a pick in return?
Right, but if you have the choice of, wait a month and see if a team needs a defenseman better, and you can go from a 5th to a 3rd, and the only caveat is you have to play 4 weeks, then you're going to do that 10 out of 10 times too.
Well, and I hate to do this because but I think it's the first thought everybody had when they saw this trade happen is Olli Maatta got you a 3rd, and Jake Wollman making the same amount of money, you had to give up a 2nd to offload. And I understand Maatta, the Utah Hockey Club was desperate, and that has a lot to do with what you get in return for a player. But having to give up assets to offload Jake Wallman to San Jose, a bottom feeder, it makes that trade look even worse. Like, Jake Wallman is a more, in my opinion, and people can disagree with me all you want, because I understand he was getting scratched late in the season. He wasn't performing the way he was the year prior, but he was also asked to take on a ton of responsibility playing on Moritz Seider's left-hand side. So I know analytically he was getting caved in, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was playing with Moritz Seider, who was getting the toughest deployments in the league. Like, in all reality, Jake Wallman's probably a second or third pair defenseman in the NHL, and we said that last year. But I personally believe he's a better defenseman than Olli Maatta overall. And the fact that you had to give up a second to offload him, but you got a third to take on, get rid of Olli Maatta, I know circumstances are different, but it just, in my opinion, makes that trade look even worse. And I will, in all of the good things that Steve Yzerman has done, building this organization back to a competitive hockey club, that one will always stand out to me as awful asset management. And I know I shouldn't have dragged up the past, but I know that's what everybody was thinking with this trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to.
Yeah. All right. I'm done. I got nothing else to say on the trade.
No,
I think we covered it. We're going to head to segment 2. We'll talk about October and November in terms of scheduling, the results, and what's to come. So stay tuned. Segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concert, comedy, theater, and so much more. And they have that all-in pricing toggle. And when you turn that on, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Again, you got to turn that toggle on, though, so you get that total up front. Get a panoramic view of your seat before you buy when you look inside the app. And the Game Time guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And of course, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry with the Game Time ticket coverage. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's talk now about October and November. The Red Wings finished the month of October 4-5-1. That is 9 points. That ties them technically for both fourth and last place in the division, because every team in this division is struggling out of the gate, save a few. I just want to know, how are you feeling after this start? I know personally I had set the goal for 500, 10 points. They fell just short of that. But how are you feeling about this team after the month of October falling just short of the goal we had set?
Yeah, there's a lot of mixed emotions with that. I think you kind of have to separate the eye test and how they're actually playing on the ice versus the record. And I think it kind of becomes a glass half empty, glass half full type of conversation, right? For instance, the record I am pretty okay with. I mean, this is something that I think going into this month, I had said around 500, even if they're slightly below. Right. I would take that if there were, some signs of life on the ice, which we'll talk about in a second. But I think that the record isn't catastrophic. Like you said, that, yes, they're tied for last. They're also tied for fourth, which puts you in a great position in the division. So I don't think the record is what people are having a problem with. I think it's then the other half of the conversation, which is how are they getting these wins? And it's ridiculous hockey. I mean, they have not played a full, complete, really solid 60 minutes. I don't think yet this season. That there's been that they do have a shutout win. What was that? The second game of the year they had a shutout win. But they have. It just seems like it's always something. There's always something that goes wrong, or that the Wings just can't adjust to. And I think that is the internal struggle that I'm kind of having when evaluating the first months of the season. It's like, okay, well, the record is, I'm not saying it's good, but you didn't play yourself out of contention in the first month of the season. You're right there in the thick of it with the rest of the division. But I think there's also half of, your brain that's like, well, if you keep playing like you have, you probably will by December 1st. And so
Right.
it's just it's a weird line to walk. I guess where I stand is like, you're not out of it. You should, count your lucky stars, whatever the saying is, that you are, right? That you aren't out of it and that you are still in contention, but you are going to have to change something and not look how you just looked in order to continue that, staying in the thick of the race going forward. They're not going to be able to play like they did and repeat this record. I don't think copy and pasted throughout the season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they continue to play like this, they're going to regress hardcore. And I think I'm kind of where you're at, right? Like, I wanted them to be at least 500. My reasoning being is you have a tough October slate. You're playing against a lot of really good teams, but you yourself are gunning for the playoffs. And if you want to be considered a serious playoff contender, you're going to have to win games against good teams. They did do that, but they were ugly wins. And, I don't want to try and have my cake and eat it too, right? On one hand, like, did they fall just 1 point short of what I wanted them to do at 10 points? And yeah, I'm not going to throw a fit over that one extra point they lost, but could they have played a lot better? Yes, it was a really rough month. Even in the games they won, they were saved by goaltending a lot of the times. Just phenomenal performances, and that's why they would end up winning hockey games. And I'm with you, like, in the standings, I can live with it. Tough month of October is behind us. They're about 500. Month is easing up in November. That's great. But if they continue to play this way, it's not going to get better. And that's the problem. And looking ahead to November, right? They have 13 games in November. So that's 26 points on the line. They have 3 because they have the West Coast road trip, one of the first West Coast road trips to California. The California road trip, I should say, before they go to Western Canada here in November. So they play the Sharks, the Kings, and the Ducks. The Sharks and the Kings both aren't very good still. Sharks are horrendous still, who you went 1-1 with last year. And then you have the Chicago Blackhawks as well, who I think you swept last year, if my memory serves. But one was like a comeback, the Patrick Kane comeback game. So like you shouldn't need a comeback against the Blackhawks. I'm sorry, especially when Connor Bedard was still hurt. Like you have an easier month ahead of you. You have 3 no excuses to lose games. Again, that's Chicago, the Sharks, and the Ducks. You have 6 winnable games, which are against teams that I feel are in your tier. Starts off with Buffalo this Saturday. You also have Pittsburgh, who you should have beat the first time with how bad they're playing. They're frauds this year, although the Red Wings, we'll talk about that maybe in another month. The Islanders, who I feel are in your tier. The Bruins, who are not beating the fraud allegations right now either. They're struggling out of the gate. The Islanders again, as well as Calgary, who's off to a hot start, but I don't think they're going to maintain that. And you got 4 what I would call tough games. Games that I think are against teams that are better than you, and you'd be lucky to come away with a win. And that's Toronto, New York again, LA, and New Jersey, who you did already beat once, but is still a very good hockey team. So that means that you have 9 games on a 13-game slate that I personally think are winnable, 3 of which are inexcusable to lose. And if a 100-point pace puts you in the playoffs without having to worry, that means you got to win 16 points. About 15 or 16 points, that's 8 wins. So you got to go 8-5 in the month of November to have a 600 win percentage in the month of November. I think 8-5 with this schedule is doable, especially with 3 against teams that you have no excuse to lose to. Doesn't mean that's how it's going to play out. They could have 8-5 and then beat teams they shouldn't, lose the teams they can't as well. But any combination that gets you to that number will restore my confidence in this team for this season and, extend the leash a little bit longer to Derek Lalonde.
Yeah, that's not an unobtainable, crazy ask either, right? 8-5 isn't That isn't, oh my goodness, this team needs to have like some magical turnaround like the Tigers needed in, August, where it was like, well, they better be the best team in baseball the rest of the way or else this season's over. And then they did it, right? Like
Right.
you're not, that's 8-5 is, if you just play a little bit better than 500 hockey for a month, you're talking about being right back in the mix and right back in the thick of things there. So, or staying, I guess, in the thick of things within the division. So, yeah, I think that's super obtainable, and I also think that would kind of re-inject some confidence going, because it's still early. Like even after November, it's going to be still early in the season, right? We're talking about the first 2 months of a season that is going to go until mid-April. So I think that would just really, I don't want to say like save the season. It's far too early to be like, oh, season's over, whatever. Like you said, they're tied for fourth. But I do think that in the eyes and the confidence level of the fan base would change greatly with a well above 500 solid kind of 8 or 9 win month for sure.
And like, I won't cry. Like if they go 7-6, that'll be fine too. You're still above 500, but 8-5, in my opinion, is the ideal record that they need to have to restore faith, as well as get back, keep yourselves on pace to be in the mix for the playoffs, because 8-5 this month makes your overall record 12-10-1, which gives you 25 points on the season at that point, puts you on pace for 89 points on the season, which is right around where you were last season. So like it doesn't just give you a good month to give you a little bit of a boost into the standings, but like it helps cover up the rough performance you had. But again, all of that hinges on this team figuring it the F out.
Right.
Like if this team doesn't figure it the F out on the ice, they're not going to go 8-5. But if they have another month like they did, even with a lighter schedule, an easier schedule, I should say, well, then we're having serious conversations about the man behind the bench.
For sure.
So,
agreed.
All right, Scotty, we're going to head to another quick break. When we return, anything we got left to say about this we can, and then we'll move on to the Sabres. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, do you have anything left to add in terms of like November expectations?
No, I think just again, kind of reiterating that this is all great. We can talk about what record we want them to see, we want to see out of them and whatnot. But again, to a similar conversation could be had then. Like it's everything's relative. Like if you would have told me that this was the Wings record through October, again, I wouldn't have been the most upset because of how tough the schedule is. But watching these games is a far different story. They don't look very good any given night. So I think more so than the record. Now, obviously, in order to keep the season entertaining and keep the season in line with the goals that were laid out by a lot of the fan base of, pushing for a playoff spot and whatnot, then yeah, they need to win, 7 and 9 games here in this month. But I'm looking for them to not look like they have, like more than anything, like more than any record, more than any like specific game, like you need to get a win here, whatever. I'm looking for them to even just like once, just to prove that it's in there somewhere. Just not look like the team they have looked like, which is super inspiring stuff. But that's kind of how I feel.
Like we're literally asking them to have, like, if they have an 8-5 month, they'll still just be 12-10-1, which is right on the cusp of playoff action. So like, I'm not asking them to go insane. I'm just asking them to beat the teams they should and go 500 the rest of the way. Like 6 of those points, 3 of those wins are going to should come against those bottom feeder teams, the teams that are still in the thick of a rebuild. Then I'm asking them to go 500 against the rest of those teams. Of course, it's hockey, so you're not going to necessarily beat those teams, right? You'll lose to like the Ducks, but then you'll beat the Leafs or something like that. But as long as that's the record at the end of the month and there's signs of this team figuring it out, then I'll be like, all right, October was just a fluke. They were just all very sick from the flu. It's behind us. But they're not going to be 8-5 if they don't figure it out. Scotty, they play the Sabres on Saturday. Already played the Sabres once this year, and it was a high-scoring game. The Sabres pumped the Detroit Red Wings, had, 5 goals in that hockey game. Tage Thompson scored twice. Red Wings at one point tied it up. Lucas Raymond, shorthanded goal, who, by the way, getting a lot of penalty kill time Lucas Raymond has, which has been really exciting. But third period, they pulled away. That was Bowen Byram at late in the second took the lead. And then Jack Quinn, empty net. That was the puck that went off the post from Kane's shot right to Quinn, who's fired it all the way down to ice the game. How you feeling about this hockey game, man?
Yeah, this is a game I'd really like to win. You obviously lost to them already. Interdivision, you don't want to go down 0-2 to Buffalo before, American Thanksgiving. Like basically before the end of October. I know this game's technically played on November 2nd, but like within the first month of the season, you don't want to start off 0-2 against Buffalo. I think this is a pretty important game, as important as a game can be on November 2nd. And they have maintained the issues that they had the last time we played them are still there. They have gotten no better on the power play. I guess actually that's a lie. They technically have scored a power play goal. So I guess that is an improvement from where they were going into. Obviously, their first power play goal of the year was against the Detroit Red Wings.
Okay, I was going to say, was that one power play goal us? Because they did have that one.
No, I think they've scored another now.
Oh, okay.
Since then, at least. But they're still very much 32nd in the NHL at the time of this recording. And yeah, they still allow a lot of goals. They are still toward the bottom of the league in defense, but usually try and outscore their problems. Their goal scoring this year has been pretty solid, as it was last time the Wings played them. So yeah, like you know what you're going up against. You know the style of team you're going up against. You know what they're not good at. You should have the special teams advantage, but that's, I don't know. Again, that's a should. I'm hoping that is the case. And yeah, man, like I just think that this is actually a really important game for being on November 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And this is a Buffalo Sabres team that at 5-on-5 this season, shot attempt percentage, shot attempt share, I should say, they're 8th in the league right now. They have 494 shot attempts for, 434 shot attempts against. So their 5-on-5 numbers are looking a lot better. The thing here is that they take a lot of shot attempts. Like they're 8th in the league in shot attempts, but actual shots that get to the net, they're ranked 24th. So this is a team that loves to fire quantity over quality, and we saw that in the game against the Detroit Red Wings. Like the key here is at 5-on-5, you got to keep the puck off Tage Thompson's stick. He's on fire to start the season. Yeah. He's got 12 points in 10 games, 7 goals, 5 assists. Goaltending for them has been not great. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's got a save percentage of .890. So it's just like, in the offensive zone, they're going to, like you were saying, they outscore their problems. They take a lot of shot attempts, but not all of them go to the net. But they're just firing at the net, hoping eventually one goes in. And they are, to their credit, after a 3-game losing streak to start the season, they are now, like the Red Wings, 4-5-1, tied for the Red Wings in fifth in the division. So that's why it's like so paramount that the Detroit Red Wings come out and they win this hockey game. Because not only would it give you 2 points against an opponent, so it'd kind of be like 4 points, in a way, when you think about it, like how many games back are you from this team? But, that goes towards the tiebreaker at the end of the year, the head-to-head matchup. And this is a team that wants to be in the mix. So, like, if you're looking at how you're going to beat this team, it's playing good defense, which is hard for this team. Like, this team, we've talked about it on, and I don't mean to get distracted and go on a tangent, but, like, outside of the game against Winnipeg, they're traditionally very good at keeping the puck out of high-danger areas, but getting possession of the puck to stop them from getting shots is the problem. And if you can't get the puck away from Buffalo, they're just going to keep firing the puck from every angle. So shutting down Tage Thompson and shutting down their offense at 5-on-5 will be huge. and then special teams. It's kind of crazy to say this, but right now the Red Wings are 9th in the league in power play. Their power play has gotten better the last few games. It's been one of the only ways they've been scoring goals the last few games. So the power play has gotten better. The penalty kill is getting better as well. The special teams was a huge strength for the Red Wings last year. I expect it'll be a huge strength again. I know they allowed one power play goal against the Winnipeg Jets, but again, we talked about that. That was a Lions softie. They had a great penalty kill. They had 2 great penalty kills in that game. So you're going to beat them on special teams. You got to do your best to shut them down at 5-on-5 and then do your job on special teams. That's the only way you're going to beat this team right now, unless, again, they get their crap together and suddenly they're decent 5-on-5.
Agreed.
Right. Scotty, any final thoughts?
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Monday to recap the game against the Buffalo Sabres, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.
Happy Halloween.